Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important. I don't feel like going through a long intro. Let me get right to it. I'm not, again, as I've said, I'm not in any disagreement with there being a golden sphere or golden community, and I leave it up to you who live in the U.S. to decide on the necessity of either one. What I picked up on, though, as I've been listening, is the need being more important for women than it is for men. So in other words, it's an option for men. If we don't go into a golden community and separate a category, and we're part of the wider black community, as adults, it's not really going to do much against us now. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be good for children, period. But I'm not sure that LS men are going to go through worse, per se. I suspect that what would happen is that everybody catches it, of course. Everyone gets dealt a really rough hand because, black childhood can be pretty rough. Period. Across the board. And so, I do think that a golden community could be a better idea for its kids. But it's going to take a long time. The other thing, too, to understand is that as LS men, or MLS men, we can easily, and I think MLS women have said that they can do the same thing, but we can easily go to Southeast Asian ladies, some Afro-Latinos, some parts of the continent where they're okay with us. We can have kids that have good childhoods. We can have children in environments that won't beat them down on sight. So what I'm saying is that I do think we may face childhood trauma much like ladies do, and even much like children who are abundantly melanated face, because we just came from a community that makes childhood traumatic. And on occasion, even for the adults. But I have to understand, I'm trying to understand what it is about a golden sphere and golden community that is actually not only a better deal for us than what we currently have in the wider black community, but actually makes it as good a deal even. See, in the wider black community, once we get to adult, really even in the teens, once we get there, men who fit negative stereotypes are sexually rewarded for fitting negative stereotypes. Now, abundant melanin is not a negative, however, it is negatively stereotyped. So then by extension, that becomes something that is sexually rewarded. And I'm gonna bring it back to sexual access for one reason. Sex can never be the only reward for men. However, celibacy is never a reward, and it even undoes other rewards. And within a marriage, by any definition, anyone's moral compass, there's no reason for celibacy within a marriage. I fear that this could wind up being the case in a golden community, not for reasons that others may think, but for reasons similar to Japan's rate of sexless marriages. They simply overwork themselves. They don't have a balance. Now, some would say that the West doesn't have a balance. Well, the West is more balanced than the Japanese are. The Japanese do not have a balance. If you can't do anything but work, then there's no balance. If you never work, there's no balance. If you're not doing enough work, there's no balance. I'm afraid that due to the work of building the community, many would say, nope, we don't rest until we finish all of this, because they're going to miss some things that at least were part of the community from which they come. We all will. But I'm afraid that many, especially ladies, would look at the men and say, nope, you don't rest. You ain't finished. You're not going to rest for these 16 hours. You ain't going to rest for no 8 hours. You're not going to be working 8 hours a day to build. You're going to be working 24 hours a day to build. We need. And I'm going to tell you straight, there is no reason for men to agree to something like that. I see why men in Japan go hikikomori when they're young, especially when they're young. That's when sex is more important. It really is. Jobs are even fewer and far further between. And the women are at their pickiest. That's a bad deal for any man, period. Might as well go hikikomori. Why work hard in a situation like that and there's not a reward? Both the non-sexual and sexual rewards are not there. What the hell would you do that for? And who's benefiting from all the work everybody else is doing? I think that MLS men want to know where the reward is and where is the consideration for what they want. And I'm not really so sure that that's there, because and I'm not even talking to the ladies that are bringing the gender war with them into the Goldensphere, which I fear has already been done now. I'm talking to the ladies who don't want to do this, who generally mean well, but who just keep forgetting about men's interest. They're concerned with their own. They're bigging each other up. That's fine. They're pedestalizing each other. That's optional. It can hurt in the long run when it comes time to find a guy, but they're doing this. They're giving each other women's advice, and they're not even considering the advice of men. See, the difference is, if I sit up and I ask you how these MLS men can impress you, even if you don't mean any harm, you may not tell the truth. You may leave something out that you didn't even realize you wanted, or you would lie. And if you do lie, or even if you leave out the important things, that's the same thing as what the gynocracy has done. And that's the same thing as what Karen, Becky, and Amber have done to their boys. Notice I said their boys, because they don't just lie to the husbands, which is bad enough. They lie to their sons, grandsons, nephews, younger brothers, friends, buddies, classmates. And so these guys also grow up with a completely off idea of what women want, and then you wind up with guys that, I'm not saying everybody goes the Elliot Rodger route, but you wind up with guys who have the confusion he expressed beforehand. And many men, most men actually just opt out. They try, and in steps as they get older, they opt out. And they just say, never mind. And then you're wondering where these guys went and why nobody's approaching you and how you're being overlooked and you're so bad and fire and all this other stuff. And yeah, well, I mean, you were so bad and so fire that nobody met your standards. Most men are normal. Most men won't meet your standards. Most men say the odds are not in my favor. Never mind. You got one man that goes to Florida for 1 or 2 months out of every year, drives cabs, saves money, and that's enough for him to go back to the Philippines for the rest of the year with his wife and her family. You have that. And what is the reason for that? Because that's a better deal for him. And now, granted, he's a Wyatt. But even for him, for Western men in general, that is a better deal than staying in the West with Western women, trying to impress them and give them the life they want, when most people are never going to get that. You drive into these homes with the houses in which you want to live, that's fine. But understand, most people won't live in these places. And rarely do they get to live there on their own efforts. One guy, there was one man in somebody's video, he left a comment, but one of the things what he said in the comment was he had lived in a neighborhood like this for a while, and he noticed that although most of the people in the neighborhood were in fact Wyatts, they always had some kind of help. They had family inheritances and things like that helped them out, and even living parents that helped them out. They never just made it on their own. He didn't know the ones that had just made it on their own when he got to know them. Stop and think about that. I don't get I don't get to see this in my family. But they get to see this in theirs. Family ain't even as important to them as it is to us, at least according to the stereotypes. And yet they've got this family wealth. And I understand that many of you MLS ladies, you feel like this is the life you deserve and it's great and it's dandy, but you will feel like it's the life you deserve. Unfortunately, if you don't think that the men deserve this life as well, then you're simply going to be looking to the men to give you the life that they don't deserve, but you do. In other words, I see the possibility of many of you beginning to think of your men the same way that the rest of the West does. You're already Western ladies, which is not automatically a bad thing, but the problem is that it is, culturally speaking, automatically bad because it means you are trained to view men a certain way. The way that the gynocracy and the wider black community views men, we know that's bad. And the way that Karen and Becky and Amber view their Wyatt men, which is bad. And this is why I said you will have to be different from other Western women. And one of these ways is you will have to actually appreciate your men more, even when they don't make a lot of money. And that's going to be a hard thing to do. And the men you do choose, you're going to have to be willing to bend the hell over for them, lift up the skirt and pull down the panties frequently. And that's going to be a hard thing for many of you to do, especially if you don't have the material life that you want, the financial well-being that you want. Most people in the world won't have it, but you will, as Western women, have been trained. And the training won't be your fault, but if you don't untrain yourself after I've told you, it will be. I know it sounds like I'm pretty much saying you will have to give and get little, but it's not so much that as it is that I'm not saying you're not worth much. I'm simply saying that because of the way life is, you will have to determine whether you're going to ask for less than other women or offer more in exchange than other women. One of these, you will have to be better than them, and that will mean either asking for less or offering more. Because understand, it may seem like, well, that we're offering a worse deal at our own expense than what they're offering. Yeah, it will be, because they're offering these deals that are terrible, and look what it's getting them. They're calling in to Kevin Samuels. And they're telling on themselves. And we can say what we want about him. But one thing is that when he tells them, it's based on what they say about their own lives. He lets them tell on themselves, and then he's like, get a dog, buy a loan. Because they can't understand that they're asking too much already and offering too little in exchange. So really the flaw is with them. Not with we men when we come along and say either ask for less, offer more, or combine the two somewhere. That is something that MLS men would have to say. Most will not say this because they don't want to sound like bums, and most people are not really bums, but I'm going to tell you this. I can say that. It doesn't hurt me if you take the advice. It doesn't hurt me if you don't take it. It doesn't hurt me if you cuss me smooth the uckfout. Again, I'm not talking to those of you that want to bring the gender war in. And I'm going to call your names out next week, Lord willing, if I don't forget. I'm talking to the ones that actually don't mean any harm, but there's still things you're going to have to untrain out of yourself. You ladies are more so concerned with each other. You have a right to be, but what you want from men is still these are still things you talk about and you discuss without concern for what the men also want, what's in their interest. I'll give an example. And I count this as something she just didn't think about. I'm not saying she did this with malice. But one briefly mentioned that she would tell you how to get more of what you want out of men. But one thing you'd have to do, she said, you ain't got to be a virgin, but you're going to have to close your legs. Now, I don't think she meant any harm, but I'm going to tell you, that's a hell of an insult to men. And MLS men know these games even more so from a younger age. And I'm going to make sure that they know. Because I'm one of those that make sure that young cats learn. Wait a minute, excuse me. You can be a virgin and close your legs. because you're being consistent. Men can respect consistency. You don't come up to a man and you close your legs and then he finds out you actually opened them to somebody else and y'all weren't married. You don't do that. You're going to run that man off. You're lucky if he even tells you why he's breaking it off. He done. Or he going to screw someone else in the meantime. He's going to get you back. If he has any self-respect, and I don't even promote fornication. As a Muslim, I'm against it. I'm for marriage. But if that man actually goes along with this idea, stays celibate, and then marries you, especially if he's already a virgin himself, marries you, lays with you, and you ain't a virgin, good God Almighty, that man has insulted him. You've insulted him, and then he's insulted himself. Now, this sounds crass and cruel the way I said it because you've been trained to think of it this way. But that's also because you've been trained to think that what men want is not only unimportant, but actually an indicator of what not to do and what to withhold. That's part of the training. As MLS women, if you want a golden sphere or golden community and would you want the men involved, you're going to have to throw things like this out. You're going to have to meet these men halfway. I'm sorry. But it boils down to this. Let's say you ain't a virgin. You want to get more out of men. You want to close your legs. Guess what that means? Number one, you're going to have to prioritize marriage. You're going to have to tell this man, I want to screw your brains out. I just want to do it in a marriage. I'd rather marry you early than to fornicate. You have to lay that out for him. Second, if you ain't a virgin and you're going to do this, then you need to make sure that one, he ain't one as well. And that he needs to have a body count similar to yours so that you're both on the same page. Because you ain't going to respect that man anyway if he agrees to terms like this. He agrees to be the first guy to whom you close your legs and then marry you. I mean, stop and think about how insulting that is to him. It's similar to you hearing a man say, well, I spent all this money on all these other women and didn't get much out of it. So I'm going to withhold my money till I get them guts, till I get them draws. I spend all this money on these other women, but until I get them draws or we get married, I'm not spending on you. You're going to look and say, wait a minute, if you were willing to be stupid and stupidly generous to other women, and even if they took advantage of you, you're not going to turn around with me and get stingy. Yeah, that's how you would feel. You mean to tell me you bought these B-words roses and expensive gifts and trips and they didn't give you none or very little, and then you come to me and you like, oh, we gonna wait? You're gonna be ticked off. Well, guess what? Same thing. As crass as I'm saying sounds, you were trained to see it that way. Now, I would have used the draws as an analogy, but most of you would never admit to each other or to yourselves that the draws are that important. Most of you wouldn't do that. You would never say this. So even if I said, imagine he comes to you and he done slammed a bunch of women to the back and broke their back and, had them coming all over the bed sheets, and then he comes to you and I want to wait. Actually, that might tick you off, but you wouldn't admit that if I said that. Again, I'm not saying this out of hatred. I'm saying this just to let y'all know that you just, all I'm saying, and this is again to those of you that are not hateful, you're simply going to have to just factor in what men are looking for and be considerate of that, what is in men's interest above and below the belt. But I got to keep bringing in sexual access, because when women are willing to consider his interest below the belt, they're willing to consider his other interest as well in general. I mean, at least if they're married. But when they're willing to withhold the interest below the belt, then they turn around and don't really care about much else. And plus, it won't matter. And so that's why I keep bringing it back to that. But I'm not forgetting about all of the other parts of the marriage and the life together and all that. But I'm simply saying, my point in this is just simply that for those of you who mean well, you're still going to have to retrain yourselves. There are things that we MLS men are going to have to learn as well too, but the only way we're going to be able to learn is through having another experience, a different experience with women that are attractive. That's it. And that's a possibility. It's up to you if that can happen or not. But we know this. And we're oftentimes willing to do the work on ourselves if we can spot the necessity for it. I don't know if anybody's told you this before as ladies or not. I'm not sure. as ladies that grew up in the West, I don't know if anybody ever sat you down and said this to you before. If nobody did, then consider this an intervention. And also, I want you to understand this too, ladies. It is important that you had your dads. That is true. It's important that you had your fathers. However, unfortunately, in many cultures, Western and non, but especially in the West, many girl dads don't actually tell their daughters you're going to have to make some difficult choices when it comes to men. Many of them don't. I don't know why, but many of them instead just let their daughters think they're princesses coming up. You're not. When you call each other princesses and queen, it's okay as long as you remember that this is just merely a compliment to each other. Like when we men might call someone king. Okay, well, it's a compliment. You're not actually a king. And that's okay. Not everybody's going to be one. Most people, good God, not even 1% of people are ever going to be that. There's nothing wrong with it. So when you call each other queens and princesses, as long as you understand it's just a compliment, but that's not actually your station in life, then fine, dandy. But oftentimes your dads have not sat you down and told you this. Oftentimes they just kind of spoiled you and, no man's good enough for you. Their role in your life is important, that's true. I just wanted you to understand that unfortunately, they may not have sat you down and told you this, and so I would do it. Because I gain and I lose nothing when I do it. I mean, I gain good deeds from trying to tell you that which might help you in the long run, certainly. But I don't lose anything if you don't take it. And I don't gain anything in this life, in this world. I won't see these good deeds until I pass away, if God even accepts it as a good deed. But I won't see anything in this life, in this world. I'm already married, happily so. I plan to stay that way, to the same lady. I'm spoiled. I'm saying this so that more of you can enjoy this. But understand, when I say enjoy it, I cannot guarantee you, because no one can guarantee anybody else a certain standard of living. I just can't. The economies are volatile, and I don't think they're going to get better in the future. They're just not. I don't think economies are going to get better until after Jesus gets back. Yeah, we Muslims actually expect him to come back. That's another story for another recording, but you get the idea. But the thing is that as economies get bad for anybody, at the very least I could say this. You have an option. If you take my advice, you do have an option. Whatever the economy is going to do to your personal financial situation, you'll have an option of going through it with someone or by yourself. You get to choose. If you do what I say. If you disregard men's interest right off the bat automatically for financial reasons, then you could go through the financial situation by yourself, but you won't have the option any other way. Nothing else will be an option. But please, even if you don't think that my advice is helpful, please at least avoid the same mistakes that other Western women have made. And if you don't think that I'm the one to listen to for that, then it's real simple. Watch Who Calls Him to Kevin Samuel's show. Watch what they say, because they're telling on themselves. And if you think that's a bad idea, I really can't help you much after that. But you can at least talk to the men and say, well, what is it that Western women have done to drive you the F away? Because they've done it. Or you can look at what some of the Afro-Latinas and what the Southeast Asian women will do for their men. Then again, what you find is that they'll respect their men even if their men can't guarantee a particular lifestyle, but their men aren't bums. At the very least, it will be that. So I guess I'm back to the same thing. But even if you doubt me, at least take this advice. Try some way from someone you trust to find out what the mistakes are of the other Western women, so you don't make those same mistakes. Because if you do, even you who don't mean any harm will either run the men off, or at best you'll just have a situation that doesn't bring them in. Remember their experiences. Forget about mine, remember theirs. To the ladies that are actually trying to bring this gender war in, you know who you are. And the reason you know who you are is because you don't forget what men want. You actually want to withhold what men want from men, even in a golden context. And if that's what you're looking to do, then you know who you are. And if that's what you're looking to do, and I've spotted you, I'm calling your name next week unless you write down or say something about how you're not trying to bring this war in. If you don't know whether or not you're one of these ladies, that's easy. Think about what men want. Does that bother you? I mean, above and below the belt. Think about what's in men's interest. Does it bother you, or are you okay with it? Don't worry about whether or not I know you exist. Because some of you, I don't know you yet. I don't know who you are yet, but about 4 or 5 of you I know exist. I can remember who you are. And even then, I might spare a few because of doubt. But if you are always thinking only about what you want from men and never about what they want from you and what to trade in exchange for it, and you talk like you know that's how you think, you talk like this, and you can't be bothered to care about what's in men's interest. If you think men owe it to guarantee some sort of standard of living, like you think that men owe a particular financial situation as a guarantee, which is never guaranteed to anyone, and you feel stern on that, you're one of those that'll wind up bringing the gender war in. But most importantly, if anybody speaks on behalf of men's interests without necessarily trying to trash yours, do you hate them? Do you go up against them? Do you think that men should not look out for their interest? There's one of you that actually sits up and says, I'm willing to submit, but in the same time, you'll say that men should not look out for their own interests, trying to protect them. It's okay for women to protect their interests, but it's not okay for men to protect theirs. You will say this. You've not made videos of what I'm talking about now, but you said this before. So I know I'm such a jerk because I'm only giving you a week. If you think this way, don't worry about whether I know you exist. Think about whether you're going to write down on your post or whether you're going to finally upload a video saying, I don't want to bring the gender war into the Goldensphere. Because even if I've identified you as such and I'm about to put your name out there next week, and then I find out that you put a video out saying, you know what, I'm not, or you put a comment, you left a comment somewhere, I would see it under one of my videos, preferably under one of mine, preferably even under here. If you simply say in a comment underneath this one, I'm not trying to bring the gender war into the Goldensphere, I'll spare you. Unless you say I never was and I know you were. Unless you say, I've never tried to do this, but I saw where you were trying to do it. But yet I'll even give a hint. If you don't see what was wrong with Kevin Samuels telling men before he got on the women what they needed to do, and now you have an issue with Kevin Samuels since he's begun talking to women, then that's a double standard right there. And if that is your idea, now if you got a problem with both ends, at least I can say, okay, I get it. But if you got a problem with one and not the other, mainly if you got a problem with the second one and not the first one that he used to do, just go ahead and admit it. You're going to bring the gender war in. Because you think that what you want is worth considering and that what he wants right off the bat is wrong. That's what you think. Might as well go ahead and be honest about it. I fear that you may have already succeeded anyway. You may have already brought this gender war into the Goldensphere, and I don't think there's much I would be able to do to prevent it, but this is one of those efforts. Because I want the men that are already in it to know and to understand the difference between you and the ladies that just forget what men want, and the difference between both of you and the ladies that may come in later on and actually care about what you want and what they want. And unfortunately, that third category that I just mentioned, I don't find in the West yet. Not yet, but to those of you that are not trying to bring in this gender war, you have a chance to be the first Westerners to fall into that category. Because believe you me, men have already been forced to. Unless, of course, they're just willing to live their lives alone. And even men who have been willing to consider, most men that have been willing to consider what you want and what they want, both still wind up by themselves. Because at the end of the day, one thing that still is going to hold true in your sphere, in your community, and if I live in it, in ours, it'll still hold true. It will be that men will be the ones that were easier to get and easier to please and easier to keep. That will hold true. But as such, it will mean that the tone of romance and couple formation in whatever context, premarital or postmarital, will be up to you. And with that power comes responsibility. Any of you that want that power and refuse the responsibility are at war. Those of you that want that power and forget the responsibility, you can be reminded. And if you handle the reminder well, you're not at war with us. And if you reject the reminder, you join the first category that is at war with us. And if you've come in already remembering that power and that responsibility, you're an ally. You are actually one that can pull MLS men. You can lure MLS men into what it is that you want to build, the sphere and the community offline. Because if that's your attitude and that's your take, then once you're visually a man's type, you already have it. That's it. I hope that this helps. I really do mean well. But that's not something that I can prove overnight. It's going to take a long time to see, and I realize that. But I do mean well in the meantime. Hopefully this will help. In any case, thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out.